So I'm just gonna tighten this a little bit. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. My name is Joe Buskins. I'm a second generation professional boat builder, 100-ton captain, full-time fishing guide, and in the winter months we do building and repair here in our boat shop. We're in episode 11 of our project boat rebuild, and it's all about transom replacement. That is the phase that we are at right now. Now, in our previous episode, we did some grinding and sanding, and we did some cutting and fitting, and you can see we've got our piece of Coosa board. That's your 26-pound density Coosa, which is a marine, like a plywood replacement, if you will. It won't soak water, it's not gonna rot, and that's what we used exclusively when we were building our 29 for all the transom stringers, floor, bow deck, rear deck. But we've been staging all day, and it is actually after dark, but in the winter months it's not that late, so we still got a little time to work here. And what we've done is we've dry fit everything. So we've test fit our Coosa. You can see we've got our big transom clamps, which if you're doing a transom replacement, you're gonna need some kind of clamping mechanism. And we've got an episode previously in the channel here that shows exactly how we built these transom clamps. Now we've also got all of our fiberglass pre-cut to do this staging and prep work. As I mentioned, we've been working on the boat all day getting ready for fiberglassing and bonding this in. But we got one layer of the 1708 biaxial. That's going to be at your 45-degree weave there, and it's got one layer of the CSM stitched on in the back. And then we're using 2 layers of 1 ounce CSM or chop strand mat, and you'll notice we feathered the edges on that so you get a better transition. And we've marked everything out. You'll notice we've got some little marks right here that are going to correspond with marks on the transom. So tonight what we're doing is we're doing 2 layers of 3/4 total, which is pretty common in most boats, but we're only going to be doing 1 layer of core at a time. That's typically how we've always done things, and there's some advantages to it. So we're going to go over a couple fundamentals. Prep is always so important. So we've got some acetone that we're going to be doing a little bit of wipe down before we get ready to lay some fiberglass. We also want to do a temperature check on our surfaces, and we are holding right there at 72.9 degrees, which we just did an episode on using a heat sensor and making sure you're working in the proper temps. Now we do also have some fans blowing in the background, but I'm going to do a little bit of acetone. Now normally, folks, if you're doing this at home, obviously you want to be super careful with acetone, and wearing a respirator is a good idea. We do have some real good fans going, and we've got a nice open shop. That's going to help dry out any humidity and clean up or get rid of any possible oils or contaminants. Now I've been really careful through the whole process of prepping, always wearing gloves. Not only does that protect you, but it protects what you're working on. A lot of people don't think about it, but you have oils and salts in your skin. Sometimes when you're sweating, that can get on the surface, and we certainly don't want any contaminants there. So that'll also kind of open up some of those fiberglass fibers, because at this point the boat has fully cured. This is an older boat. There's not a whole lot of chemical reactions going on. We're relying mostly on a mechanical bond for our new resin. And as far as resins go, if you've been following the channel, you know that we really like the vinyl ester resin from Fiberglass Warehouse. Vinyl ester is not a resin a lot of people are familiar with. And only in the last few years have they really come up with some formulations that work really nice for the DIYers. But it offers a lot of the advantages of epoxy. It bonds much more aggressively. It's got better, what they call elongation properties. So as the boat flexes and moves, it will flex and move with. So it's not as brittle as polyester, not as expensive as epoxy, and it's totally compatible with gel coats. It does not produce an amine blush, or you don't have any potential gel coat compatibility issues. Now, anytime I wipe down with acetone, I like to blow the fumes out and away. For a moment or two. And again, I've been doing this my entire life. You got to be careful working with flammable materials. We do the same thing when we're doing prepping for plywood, and you can see this, that it looks dark, and you see as we run over it with the Wagner, it opens up the surface, pores there, and that's what you want to get that good mechanical bond. Moving to mixing some resin. You can certainly use a little graduated mixing cups, and we're going to be doing about a full quart at a time, but I tend to like these little popcorn cups. They're very inexpensive. Now, I did agitate this. Anytime you're working with resins or Gelcoat, very good idea to go ahead and agitate that a little bit before I tend to like to do the 2-cup method, where we have a mixing cup, then we pour into a pan. Got some MEKP, that's methyl ethyl ketone peroxide, and we're going about 12 cc's. We're not going real hot tonight because I need plenty of working time. This should be enough. Generally, remember folks, you're going to want to go at 1 to 2%. If y'all want to follow me. Uh-oh. I've got our Coosa already drilled. We got some vent holes in this thing. We got it sitting on our little board with the screws running through to keep it kind of suspended. That's one of our other little tricks that we use when we're trying to resin coat both sides of a product. I like to resin coat the Coosa board and plywood, especially if we're doing plywood. I think it's very, very important. Now, I have a gentleman that I've been talking to that's one of our Patreon members, and he's got a transom replacement going on, and we were talking the other night, and he thought he'd have to do 2 layers consecutively at the same time, but that would be an awful lot going on. Maybe if you're in a production shop and you're really rolling, you could do 2 layers, you know, bed one, clamp your other, but I find that it's going to get a better result, and I'm going to show y'all as we move through. So I know our videos tend to run long, folks, but these are boat builder grade tutorials. This isn't my first time doing this. Our family's built hundreds of boats. I'm licensed with the Coast Guard. The 29 that we built, we put over 5,000 nautical miles on that boat this summer. And the way we're doing the transom in this boat is exactly, and every step is important. So even though the videos are long, you're gonna get everything you need in this video to know how to do this kind of work. So we're coming inside here. And I always prefer to work with a roller when possible. You can just get a lot more material going a lot faster, and you get a nice uniform coat. You do not want to resin starve a project like this. That's why we're putting plenty on as a primer. One of our pieces of CSM, and it is pre-cut and fit. You can see our little marks here. See these 2 little black marks there at the top? You can see they correspond on the transom, dot, 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 dot. And that way, when we're hurrying along, it's going to be a perfect fit, and you're not going to be guessing. Now, this is also going to seriously strengthen the transom. This boat is going to be stronger and better than it was from the factory, or at least that's our goal. And now you could do this with a putty. Some people would make a thickened putty and bond the Coosa, but even a really good putty is not going to be as strong as actual fiberglass. I also had a fella comment today. He did not realize that when you're using the CSM or the chop strand mat is really good at making your initial bond. It really kind of conforms, it holds a lot of resin, and it kind of is like the glue of the fiberglass, if you will. There's some strength, but not as much as the biaxial or if you're using the woven. So you always want to start with the CSM and then add woven, or if you're doing 1708, it has a layer of CSM already woven into it on the back side. That's one thing I really like about it, is that eliminates a step. You don't necessarily have to cut out a piece of CSM as well, but because we are bonding in a core tonight, I wanted to go with 2 layers of CSM because it'll hold a lot more resin and it's going to bond better to the old transom here. I'm going to go back with about 12 cc's or so. You can see I marked it with a magic marker there, so it's real easy to see in a hurry. These are little mixing cups, are hot items on our Amazon links there, folks. All the products we use in these videos, we do try really hard to list those on our Amazon links, and that does help support the channel as well. And then our products from like Fiberglass Warehouse, especially this vinyl ester, there is a Fish Bump TV discount code for you folks at home. That'll save you some money if you want to use some of the same products that we source from our friends there at Fiberglass Warehouse. Now, another one of our little secret weapons right there, a little fin roller, a groove roller. Some people call this a bubble buster. And that is really good at getting any air. It also is really good at leveling. You can almost hear a little shh, shh, shh. So we are going with our 1708 at this point. Right there, if y'all notice, see, we lined right up on the mark. Put a corner line in there. Y'all can see when we did the dry fit earlier in the day, this is where all that prep work really shines. See how nice that fits right there. All right, now before I run my roller, this was some of the resin from the first batch. I am going to try to squeeze out as much of that out of the roller as I can, so that way when I load it, it'll be with the fresh batch of resin, and that'll give you a longer roller life. You can see there we've squeezed out most of the resin. It'll kind of start to soak in. You will notice your fiberglass will start to go transparent or semi-transparent. That is another thing I really like about vinyl esters and polyesters, is they tend to be a little thinner as a resin, and they penetrate the fabric, the fiberglass, a little easier, a little faster. Now is a good time to tell everybody how much I appreciate you tuning into the channel. It means a lot to us. We love hearing from everybody what kind of projects you're working on, or sometimes there's even little tips and techniques that you folks at home may have that you found useful or helpful. It's always kind of fun to hear. And if you guys don't mind hitting that like button, subscribe, comment, and share, that really helps the YouTube algorithm. Learning all about this kind of stuff, but it's like those little thumbs up and the comments really tell the algorithm we're doing a good job, and it will share our videos with other folks. So thank you so much for doing that. All right. My dad used to always say, whatever is got the widest, you can see like right in here, for example, it's like when you're spreading that resin out, whatever is the widest, hit it with a little more resin. We put some tape over all of the motor bolt holes and some other fastener holes so we don't have any resin running through or drooling down the back side there. That is important. Lots of little steps like that can make the difference. I keep my little fin roller in an acetone bucket. Now acetone is highly flammable, kind of on the same order maybe as even gasoline. So be very careful when working with it. You certainly wouldn't want a flame or cigarettes or anything like that. Again, there are other ways this could be done. There are some people that will mix up a putty and that is an option. But there wasn't an awful lot of glass on the exterior skin of this boat. And there's a good chance somebody I know, or maybe even one of you folks at home watching there on YouTube, might be interested in buying this little project boat when we're done. And I want it to be tip top. We are fortunate where we live here in the deep south. It stays pretty mild year round. But in our previous episode, we did some little tips and techniques for working in cooler weather. And there's some advantages to it, folks. There's some advantages. For one, it's much more comfortable wearing a respirator or a Tyvek suit when the weather is cold. Certainly more comfortable to do your grinding and sanding. One thing you can do is use some heat lamps. You can increase the amount of catalyst. You can store your resin inside at night. Some people will do that. They'll bring the resin inside so that the temperature stays moderate. And that way, when you're ready to do some fiberglass work, it's not going to be ice cold. All right, folks, maybe my cameraman will show, making a real effort here again to make sure that the pan is really emptied out, because if you don't, your pan will get what my dad called little jellies or cottage cheese. You'll get these little clumps and bumps, and once that start happening, you almost have to just start with a fresh roller, a fresh pan, really kind of reload and get ready to do it all over again, because you'll get these little hard, you see there, folks, I'm pushing some resin right into that corner. Now you see how when we tore those edges and feathered them, it makes for a nice transition going over that corner. I know I got some videos here on the channel showing how to cut and shape fiberglass. And then I've got some tricks, and again, if you're just tuning in, we've learned some things over the years installing hundreds of transoms, and knock on wood, we've never had one fail. We've done this enough. Again, that's why following each step, we've done this enough that I know what works. And obviously there's other techniques out there, and some of you folks at home may have done it differently or read some different things, but, and then you professionals out there, I know sometimes I get some comments, but the channel is mostly directed at you folks at home, your DIYers. Maybe you've never replaced a transom before, and I'm trying to show you how the pros would do it. Coming back with a little thin roller, very important to dip it in the acetone after each round, or else it'll get very sticky and tacky. And we've got enough resin to come back in here and really put a good heavy, what my dad would call a wet coat. I mean, really kind of stack it on there. And you can see, maybe my cameraman can zoom in there, you can see that it's kind of dried. Even the Coosa has kind of soaked up some of that excess resin. That's why we did it first. I wanted to give it a little time to really draw the material in there. And in a minute, I want to show you folks the purpose of these little vent holes that we have drilled at an angle. That is a critical element. There's a little tool called a 5-in-1. I'm going to bring a brush. And if you've never used one of these, you may have seen these hanging on the little paint shelf. Oh yeah, that's a 5-in-1. And if you don't have one, if you don't have one around your shop, I highly recommend. You can see that I was able to get another several big spoonfuls of material out of my roller. We can spread that around. We know exactly how this is supposed to go in there. I've got marks for everything on the transom. Maybe my cameraman can come over here and show. I put 2 marks. There's a mark right there and a mark right there that corresponds with the Coosa. So I know exactly where it is supposed to go laterally, which again makes a big difference. I have already marked my transom clamps. I know where they're supposed to go. You can see the little circles. You can see these little circles here on the Coosa themselves, where I know exactly where the bolts landed previously. What I'm going to do is just tack one. We got another one staged. If you don't have a good transom clamp, it can really compromise the quality of the bond. Now my son Logan, he's behind the camera right now, but obviously if he wasn't filming, he would be helping me do this. It's a juggle. I am still learning all the ins and outs of YouTube there, folks. We give up a lot. It takes a lot longer and a lot of effort, so I hope you folks at home are appreciating the effort we put into making these videos. I was telling somebody the other day, a 10 or 15 minute video, a lot of times there's 10 or 12 hours of production time and editing time and setup time to make that happen, so that we can share with you folks, at home. So I'm just going to tighten this a little bit. You can hear it. Matter of fact, we got resin weeping out. You can see that one right there. Resin is already weeping out a little bit. I'm going to start clamping. I usually tighten a little bit in the middle, and I'll tighten one side then the other. And you're going to want, I had one of my Patreon folks said that they made these clamps, but they put all the bolts down one side, and they realized why you need a pair of them, because as you tighten, if it's only on one side, it'll twist the clamp around. So the idea, as you're tightening these, I try to keep it mostly square to the transom. So if it's kind of leaning down that way, I will tighten that side up, and it'll bring it around. This is why I'm also saying, folks, that wintertime is a great time to do stuff like this, because in the summer it is challenging to get this done without it curing on you before, and it's a big mess if it cures before you get it fully bonded. But in the wintertime, slower cure rates, it's more comfortable to wear a suit. You can see I got fiberglass in my zipper there. Keep yourself more protected. You're not sweating. Kind of gross, but sometimes when you're doing this, your sweat will drip into the fiberglass, and that's not good. Remember, you don't want to go super crazy and wrenching down. If y'all will look, I'm just using finger tight for a lot of this. Lots of resin dripping out of those weep holes on the back side there. I'm going to give that a second to kind of settle in. You can see we do have some resin running on the back side. Important to catch that. This boat is going to get some pretty extensive filling and fairing on the transom, because it's in pretty bad shape. But if you had a newer boat, you may want to wrap that in some plastic or mask all the way across, or just kind of watch it until the resin starts to firm up a bit. We're getting resin coming out through all those little vent holes that we drilled, and that way we know we've got a nice uniform bond. Now the thing you can do, what I was saying, one of the advantages of doing it like this is in areas where you're not seeing, say for example, we got some extra resin running down there on the floor, you can actually, I don't know if my cameraman can pick this up, I'm using my brush to actually run some resin into some of these holes that are not weeping, and what that'll do is that resin will run behind the core and allow this to make a bond, and then kind of just brushing it out so that it doesn't leave big clumps and bumps, because the neater that you are, if you do this neatly in the morning, you don't want a bunch of resin drip. So I generally try to stay with it till it has tacked off. Now Coosa, there are a couple companies that have it. I've been having some folks that are doing transom replacements and having trouble finding like marine plywood. Now some people feel like they have to use something like Meranti or a Kume, which can be very expensive, almost as expensive as Coosa. But when I was growing up, and my dad built hundreds of boats using marine fir plywood, F-I-R. Fir is a type of wood that holds up quite good to the weather, and a lot of times you can actually find it near the coast, sometimes even like Lowe's. Our local Lowe's can even order it. So you might be able to go to your Lowe's and ask them to order in some sheets of fir, like AAAB marine plywood in 3/4. That can certainly work. Although Coosa is going to cost a little bit more, but it's lighter, it's stronger, it doesn't soak water, it's never going to rot, and it works very much like plywood as far as cutting it, sanding it, sawing it, bending it, that kind of stuff. All right, folks, it is actually the next morning. We let this cure overnight. Everything has tacked off and feeling good, and I'm in the process of just slacking these clamps off of here, which that's pretty typical. I get some questions sometimes about how long to leave stuff to cure, and usually overnight or the next day is a good answer. Sometimes you can get away with less, but these, if you're doing a transom replacement, we just got some T-nuts in there with some all thread, and I do have a video showing the exact dimensions. You're gonna need 2 or 3 different sizes and numbers. Now on this smaller, you'll notice this transom is kind of abbreviated, and we only needed 4 clamps. On a bigger full transom, you might want 5 or even 6 of them. And it seems like transom replacements that is a very common thing for you folks at home. And that's what this channel is all about. You DIYers, folks at home trying to save an older boat, replace a transom. Obviously, we got some stringer work to do on this boat. We'll be rebuilding this back end. I mean, it's going to be pretty extensive. So that's feeling better already. Now, what we're going to get ready to do is do a little bit of cleanup, make sure there's no little splinters or burrs, and a little bit of sanding here, and get ready for our second piece of Coosa. But this video is already running long. I think we're going to do this in 2 parts. So the next video, we will be bonding in the second layer of Coosa and getting our outer laminate on. Captain Joe, Fish Bump TV, my son Logan is my amazing cameraman, and we'll catch you folks on the next episode.